Bakshi. All right. Once again, if you don't know by now, you're never going to. It's Bakshi Ball. Howard.
Hollow.
And me.
Yes, the preeminent podcast nominally about America's favorite underground animated cartoonist that isn't Don Bluth. This week,
Don Bluth could never. He's the counterculture Don Bluth.
Yeah, he is, I don't know, man, Anastasia, trying to keep the dream of the czarist alive. What's more counterculture than that?
There's at least 4 lines from Anastasia that live in my head rent-free.
I have not seen it. What are these lines?
Don Bluth, the dad in Arrested Development?
I'm not sure what his name is.
M already has given us the line of the episode. I believe it's George?
Huh.
I don't know. Speaking of Arrested Development, though, we have a film that's not just created by Big Dog Ralph himself, but artist Frank Franzetta, who, again, it's sort of like The Smiths' How Soon Is Now, where nobody knows what that song is called or who it's by for a long time, but everybody knows it, you know?
Like, if you've seen a 70s wizard van, you know what Frank Franzetta's art looks like.
Yeah, if you've ever seen a copy of Heavy Metal Magazine, you have seen Frank Franzetta's art.
When I say guy with axe on horse,
yep,
like, what comes to your mind is an image from him, from this movie.
Yeah, and I think a year prior, John Milius's Conan the Barbarian gets made. This comes out in 83. There's, certainly a market for that. There's kind of a revival of sword-and-sandal tales and, He-Man and that kind of thing getting a revival. There's also a book that I enjoy called Detecting Men by Philippa Gates, and it talks about different cycles. It talks about different cycles in more action and masculine-driven American filmmaking through the decades, and largely the 80s you see kind of the rise of like traditional male muscular action heroes coinciding with Reaganism, but also social demographic changes about like women in the workforce and things like that. So this kind of stuff never really appealed to me because I mean, there is a sense of like a reactionary politic lurking within there, but it's also just kind of boring. Because at heart, all of these stories are just, the tough, mysterious warrior who comes to a land. It's a beautiful, partially clothed woman and fights evil.
I was not on board with the princess at first, but she won me over with the power of her magical bra and loincloth.
I've got to know where she got this thing from. It is durable.
If I find one, I'll happily order it for you. Yeah, like, I think we alluded to it in our first episode, though, but we began with wizards, right? And that can be boiled down to a similar descriptor. You have the two warring kingdoms that are polar opposite. They are who they are, and they do what they do precisely because they are good or they are evil. We get that same setup here. We get that same fancy and wandering nomads and soldiers and stuff like that. But that underscores wizards in this are effectively the same movie made some like 8 years apart. Uh, but it
Main
also
difference.
underscores that this film is so much more dull by comparison.
Uh-huh.
It's not funny. Wizards is funny.
Go on.
Well, the they killed Fritz scene is absolutely hilarious. Or the very ending of the movie is so funny. The rug pull
Exactly.
with the gun is like legitimately one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie in my life.
I thought that we were in the last 3 minutes of this movie for about 20 minutes. I I just I kept thinking I'm thinking back to Wizards. I'm like, yeah, it like once shit gets going, it starts going pretty fast, and like there's gonna be like a every movie that we've watched so far has had like a other than the Lord of the Rings because that didn't end has had like a
Breakneck pace.
big in a big moment where you're like, wow, like this was a roller coaster. It was worth it for that moment. That this movie did not have that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's circle back to it. So we had in Wizards, as you said, like the climactic scene as that capstone moment made the film worth it. American Pop, we have night moves, and again, it happens, and that's basically the end of the movie. So it's breakneck, but yeah,
The whole
that
movie
was a
was
nice
like that.
capstone. Lord of the Rings forgets to build up the Battle of Helm's Deep as a capstone, but if they telegraph that, they deliver on it. This film gives you the ending you would expect, and it ends, and you realize there is nothing remarkable about this movie, like at all.
Like it was like the history class version of a fantasy
Story,
movie. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I'm like, yeah, I believe this happened. Like, you got all the facts for sure.
Well, it's like the battle scenes are not really dissimilar from Lord of the Rings. The rotoscoping, I'll admit, is a lot tighter in this movie. But so we've seen those battle scenes before. You know, we've seen the overall structure in Wizards, and like there is more uniqueness there, or even the central gimmick of like finding Nazi propaganda, right? And there's none of that here. There's just the evil Ice Kingdom against the noble Fire Kingdom and a mysterious man with awesome powers. It's
It
just
was it was
okay.
interesting to see the rotoscoping like actually carried through with a budget. I feel like more than we have at any other point. But
Hmm.
it's also just kind of creepy because part of the thing about animation is that you can do like when they were like shuffling along a tree branch, like you can do kind of those inhuman movements and make them smooth when you're doing animation that you can't do when you're filming people. And it just looked kind of weird and clunky, and like they were walking through jello a lot of the time.
Hmm. And then there are parts like the lava explosion at the end where it is just more traditional like cell drawn animation and it looks so bizarre within the film frame. But like not in a way that's engaging, right? I guess Wizards had a gimmick. It is a much less technically polished film than this one, but part of Wizard's charm, like we've said in every episode, is like with Bakshi, there's a sense of, and apparently it is pronounced Bakshi, not Bak.
Maybe
Found
if
that
somebody
out.
else does it.
Well, that's awkward.
I've heard it both ways.
Okay, well, Big Dog, come on the show and correct the record. Um, all that to say, with all of his other films, there's like a sense of ambition or like a sense of like adorable overreach where you you have this great dream and you just fuck up one or two crucial things in a hilarious and loving way. Like there's a lovable sloppiness to a lot of the movies we've seen, and there isn't any of that here. There isn't any of like the common crudity or crassness. And this is what you get without those things. And hands on the table, I'm gonna predict that this is each of our least favorite RB film to date.
That is the case for me. I think it is the worst one, definitely. But as far as least favorite go, we actually were supposed to do Heavy Traffic today, and we're not able to do it because
I couldn't. I got to the part where he threw a sex worker off the roof of a building, or knocked her off on accident, tripped into her and knocked her
Yes,
off.
she did not die. She
what
remains
I said.
suspended by her underwear.
I just kind of stopped glazed over at that point.
That's
And
basically what a Nora is.
yeah, I don't know. So I didn't finish that one, but that one's gonna go in my least favorite. I don't know. Yeah, that was just like a weird minute and a half.
Well, and that's kind of the more interesting part of the discussion for me because Heavy Traffic, again, it's 1970s. It's RB making urban films, and it is one of his X-rated films. Now, not because it's pornographic necessarily, but like that's him
But it is graphic.
alongside. Yes, it is graphic. It is juvenile in a lot of weird ways. At the same time, there is something like very impressive about it, despite its wrong-headedness at times. It's a very interesting film, more, I think, in the vein of American Pop than this. But
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
it also gets into areas because we've talked about Ralph. He was born in Israel, raised in Brooklyn. Um, he is also like largely, I think, socially construed as a white man, and there are movies that he does, like Heavy Traffic or notably Coonskin, which is a bold film. It's
That
also
we have
not the
no
film,
business speaking on.
but you would think so. And that's not to say that it should have been made or that it's a great work of art, but you can see why it ends up being very different from what you normally assume hearing that idea on paper. Heavy Traffic, I can understand that. Now, so when M threw in the towel on that, we were going to turn to his other explicitly countercultural film, Fritz the Cat.
And yeah, we opted against that one too because it is pornographic.
It is much more pornographic, but there is like a political arc and theme to the film, but there's also like just gratuitous violence and scenes of sexual assault, which are they're animated pretty harrowingly, and it's like it's like Jeff Goldblum, right? You know, maybe you could do it, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should. And with Bakshi, because there's this juvenilia about things, you're never totally sure if this is a thing that he's the one to be presenting in this manner.
Yeah, especially in the case of, like you said, Coonskin. I just
Yeah.
think, I just think it's interesting that he can provide such a wide range of responses and emotion to his work. Like, definitely one of the more varied directors that I've seen, considering, like, for example, when we watched American Pop and loved it, called it an instant classic. We've already watched it twice since then, just to
Oh
put on.
man, I love that so much.
Yeah, like just to put it on in the background, but to have the same director also make two things that she's absolutely just not even going to sit through or attempt is really, really interesting and like pretty valid. I get it. I just think it's a fairly unique body of work in that way.
hmm And that's a fair point because, like, There is a sense of like auteurism to Bakshi despite that wide variety. Like Gaspar Noé, I understand why people refuse to even think about watching a movie like Irreversible, and that's entirely fair. But at the same time, if that kind of content is extreme for you, then it basically means you can't watch any Noé films because his entire style is that extremity. Um, Whereas Bakshi, that's not the case. Where it's more like if you rented 7 Ralph Bakshi films, you and your teenage friends for a slumber party weekend, yeah, you would end up getting like borderline pornography. You would be getting him tackling race relations in a fascinatingly deconstructive way. You would get American Pop, and you would get this movie. And I don't think it's an accident that like we don't really have anything terribly detailed to say about it. Everyone is caked up, and that's pretty neat.
Which is specifically brought to the forefront during like one really early scene in the movie when the male lead played by Randy Norton, not the wrestler.
Yeah, Dollar General WWE figurine.
Uh but there's a in the early scene where he wakes up after the subhumans think he was dead and is escaping through the trees. One of the subhumans like grabs his ass cheek and
Hmm.
pulls it down in the most weirdly graphic way.
Well,
Like
because they
there's such
slow
loving
motion it.
animation in that moment.
Yeah, like, and I think they slow it down there. And I think what they're going for is like this moment, he's almost caught and slips away, and it comes off as a very tender caress.
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm gonna get you.
Exactly.
Uh,
There.
As
There you
opposed
go,
to
get him, Tiger.
which is like, and I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, it's and that's the other thing. We have what's his nuts, the main. Okay, we have a fake main character throughout the film.
Oh,
who?
Dark Wolf?
No, not Darkwolf, because Darkwolf actually ends up being the main character. But for about an hour and 15 minutes of the run, we're following the last survivor of his clan, Randy Norton. That's the one. Tigra. No, that's the princess. What's the dude's name? Lars? Well, they just dropped out of the call, so I'm
Why are we?
assuming it's Lars. Oh, there they
Oh,
are.
hello. I started writing people's names down, and then I got too bored to even bother. I've got Juliana the Queen and Necron the Sun.
Yeah, so Necron is a bad guy, as one imagines.
And
It's a
he's a bad guy because he comes from his own magic.
That was
yeah,
wild. No, yeah.
yeah, and he looks exactly like He-Man. If he slimmed down, if he was off cycle,
That kind of did.
like there's no characterization beyond they are the bad guys. Why are they the bad guys? Because they're evil. Well, what makes them evil? Because they launched a bunch of icebergs over the world. Why did they do that? Because they're evil. And like that's the depth you get to any of it. So like you don't really have characters as much as archetypes.
Yeah. I
Because
was
yeah.
really pulling for Black Wolf to no, Black Wolf's the villain of Wizards, for Dark
Dark
Wolf to
Wolf.
be Necron's dad, but that twist was too much for this story.
Well, they really allude to it. They just forgot to record the line where he's like, by the way, Necron's my son.
So I'm not crazy there. Okay.
Yeah.
It
Like,
does feel that way to other
yeah.
people.
They needed that scene so everyone could be like, why did you name your son Necron? It's like naming your kid Thanatos. It's like, all right, well, he's going to do something criminal because what's he gonna do? Be a Thanatos working in an accounting firm?
Imagine.
Yeah. It's like how Santo Traficante was a big mob guy.
The guy stamping your ticket at the DMV.
Yep. Or how Paul Walker was known for driving.
Heh.
We have a lot of fun here, folks.
Oh.
Okay, I think the best part of this movie, and anyone listening at home can go to the Internet Archive and watch the first 3 minutes of this film for themselves. Nothing in this film is as interesting as just this opening exposition dump.
Oh,
Because it's
so
also
funny.
basically, it's all the
everything you
storytelling.
know.
Yeah, it tells you all the storytelling, a la Green Lantern. It gives you the only plot development that occurs in the film, and the way it is read. My God.
It's like the first time she's seen words.
These words specifically, this is clearly the table read for this opening monologue that they just decided to use.
Yeah, and it's there's studio room noise in the audio for the voiceover, and there's just this weird pacing and emphasis. It's kind of like Kristen Stewart in Crimes of the Future, and it's this 45-year-old woman being, long ago there was a wizard named Necron, and it's, what is happening? Can I get more of this? So it immediately stops. And I'm like, well, nothing could be as good as that again.
I think the only way that could have been better, and my brain kind of auto-corrected this, but after the first 15 seconds of hearing that opening monologue, my brain switched to the person reading it with Eartha Kitt's rendition of Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove.
Man, everyone loves that movie, and I think it's fine, but Jesus, people gotta let go of their childhood faves. Otherwise, you end up building He-Man proto-fascist male power fantasies like we see in Fire and Ice. See, that rant did have a point.
We always bring it back, folks.
Yes. Talk about Arrested Development. Oh, wait, we already did. I don't know. It's just, my question is...
That guy in the beginning really blew himself.
Ooh, you know what is the funniest thing? When a guy who's not gay says things that are kind of gay.
When a straight guy's a little lesbian with it.
Oh, no, he didn't. Necron is unmistakably queer-coded, though. See, we do bring it back.
This was the movie with the hottest cast.
Yeah?
I don't
Walk
know.
us through it.
They're hot.
Let's rank it now. Most fuckable members of Fire and Ice. Alright, I'm getting...
This is most hot. Samwise least hot.
Samwise isn't in this movie.
I know. Oh, I thought we were talking all movies.
No.
Oh, okay. In this movie,
We all know that Benny Belinsky is the hottest one.
well, I don't know who that is.
Is the piano man in American Pop.
Yes. He's mid, I think. The princess in this movie, hottest of all his movies.
Okay, Tibra. Voiced by
Tibra,
Simpsons mainstay Maggie Roswell.
The blonde guy in this movie, also incredible.
Larn.
The evil queen, also hot.
That would be Juliana.
Her son, the least hot.
Necron. I notice you're not mentioning Darkwolf.
I'm trying to remember what he looks like. I feel like he's probably second hottest.
He's the one wearing a wolf helmet.
Yeah,
he's very mysterious.
How do you
she
not
doesn't
remember
actually watch
Darkwolf?
stuff when she's watching TV or movies. She just kind of tries to absorb what's happening while paying as little attention as possible.
I just
incredible.
glaze over the whole time, yeah.
I mean, that's what happened when I watched this movie. Granted, I
Oh,
also
this
did it
guy's
for free
hot.
on the internet while I was at work, but
That's so funny because I knew you were doing that as you were sending me updates like throughout because I started the movie a half hour after you and finished it a half hour before you did.
And I took a
yeah,
nap in the middle.
I am sorry for being efficient. Okay, I'm a multitasker. What
Same.
are
No,
they gonna
I,
do?
I just thought it was really funny. The pool store just did not need you that badly.
They never do. I don't even understand why I have a job. But
How
I
much
also
do you
don't
make
understand
there?
why this
Same.
film exists, though. Because apparently, like, there was some amount of popular debate to justify it. And, like, Frank Frazetta is a name. And, like, in '83, you had things like Heavy Metal Magazine. So there was some audience for it, but I don't think enough of one to justify this film as like a cash in or a blockbuster on something popular, right? It's a film that exists for no real purpose.
That's exactly how I feel about a movie that came out, I think, the next year, right afterward. The only other movie I've ever seen that gave me the same vibe of like sheer high fantasy boredom as this one is Conan the Destroyer, specifically the sequel of the first
Mm.
movie that came out in '84.
I have not seen Conan the Destroyer, but Conan the Barbarian, it gives you Schwarzenegger, it gives you Sword and Sandals, it gives you James Earl Jones as Thusla Doom, who's
And one of my
amazing.
favorite roles.
Yep, he is also a black man, and at the end, Arnold Schwarzenegger triumphantly cuts his head off in front of a crowd and holds it above and is made king because he is the strongest.
Wow.
There's
It's got
there's
its
some
problem.
yeah, there's unsettling things in John Milius as a writer too. Yeah, like this is a film that gives you the template. But I don't think you, I, or the misses in 2025 have any real desire. Like, there's no appetite for, like, you know what I could really go for? An utterly generic, fantasy rotoscoped, like, sword and sandal movie.
Like, I'm 35 or 36 years old now. I only have so much time left on this earth.
Oh, you're just a baby. I
Not
assume that
all,
you and
not
I
all
have the
films
same
can be works
birthday.
of art, like The
Yeah.
Emperor's New Groove.
Uh,
Or
I mean, I
Adventure
would say
Time.
yeah, I do like how that show is radically rewriting perception and understanding of both animation and ourselves. Just kidding, I'm an adult. I don't know. It's just I think it is very telling that amongst all of Bakshi's film, this not to spoil anything ahead of next and our final episode, but there are specific films that, even though they are like objectively held to be the worst ones that Ralph has made, or at least notable for that. This film, by all accounts, I can see, wasn't a notorious flop. It wasn't a runaway success. It was not lambasted, and it was not celebrated. It's
It's
a film that
absolutely
seems to
fine.
it's very sterile. It seems to exist in its own vacuum universe.
Yeah, it was an absolutely fine movie.
I'm excited for Cool World. I
Okay, well, we spoiled it.
He said he wasn't gonna spoil it.
That's okay. So, why
No,
are you excited for Cool World? Which
yeah,
92?
the reason that I spoiled it is because I wasn't paying attention while trying to look up another movie that came out around the same time that I watched the same day as Cool World when I was like 7 years old.
Was it Rockadoodle?
No, it wasn't, but I saw that around the same time.
Was it The Brave Little Toaster?
Classic.
I prefer
True work of art.
I preferred the Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars, where the villain is Einstein's hearing aid.
Oh wow. The guy who wrote it killed himself, and I remember seeing it as a kid, and the lamp got struck by lightning, and everything
Wait,
else.
the
I
little
was like,
toaster guy
whatever.
killed himself?
Yeah.
No
It turns
wonder.
out he was less brave than the toaster.
Then the toaster.
Yeah. Brave little toaster goes to the bathtub. Am I right, folks?
Well, this is
Well,
not another productive.
we've hit that point in the episode. By the way, I have my groovebox here for moments like this. Check out this little one. Oh, wow. Mayor Howard, EDM champion. Someone's got to fill Avicii's void.
Okay, now we're back.
Yeah, if you're hurting, talk to someone. It's a tough world. You got to be tougher. The world is ice. You must be fire. Like Jimi Hendrix said, let me stand next to your fire.
I'm not sure who that is.
Fire or Jimi Hendrix?
Jimi Hendrix.
Okay, so you know Janis Joplin?
Janice Ray Joplin?
Close. So you know in American pop, Frankie?
He was her dry cleaner.
Yeah. Now, despite having a man's name, she is all woman. So Janis Joplin was the singer for Big Brother and the Holding Company before striking out solo and dying at 27. That's who Jimi Hendrix is.
Okay. So, like,
Yeah.
Cher.
Yeah. That's why Jimi Hendrix also died at 27.
And we've lost her.
Who, Cher?
I can only hope.
Well, if you believe. Oh my god. Okay. We sometimes you got to make your own fun, but yeah, like I think there's something else very telling about this movie because the majority of Bakshi films, and certainly the ones that we have looked at, span from 1972 to about 1982. And this film, I believe, is 83.
It is.
And after that, Ralph Bakshi does not make another film until 1992, Cool World, which we are looking at in our next and final episode. And there's a reason. Okay, because you'll also notice even longer gaps in the filmography after Cool World comes out. And it's largely the film that killed his career as far as mainstream or any kind of like people trusting him with a project go. And that's not to say he's not trustworthy, but you know, it's a question of how much money do you want to give this guy after seeing what happened last time. And that's kind of fair. I mean, movie making is a business.
If you're gonna kill the Ice Lord, you better learn to live with pain.
Yeah, and if you come at the king, you best not miss. Here's another song I wrote on my groovebox. Lighten the mood a bit. Oh. I don't even remember writing
It's
this.
a classic.
Yeah, my Novation circuit sounds haunted. Let's turn the tempo up and see if it gets cooler. Not really, it gets more
I
annoying.
love that one.
Oh, wow. Thank you. You're too kind. Let's do a little filter sweep. Never gets old. Just kidding. I'm bored with that. I think, though, that even though this does not fail to the same degree that Cool World does in the overall sense, I do think it's kind of telling that there's like a 9-year gap between him making movies. Am I wrong in that assessment?
No, I don't think so. I think it's kind of sad to see someone who's made such interesting stuff get kind of passed over after a really boring movie comes out.
Mm-hmm. And it's just like he did work in TV, and we haven't really touched on it, but he has worked fairly extensively in that. But he doesn't do much. He does like a couple animated sequences for other movies, but he doesn't direct, and certainly doesn't write any. It's
I
like
wonder
a
how much
key
of
will
that is.
start.
Did he do a Doctor? Oh my god, person's name?
Dr. Seuss?
Dr. Seuss book?
No, I
A
don't think
short
so.
off of a.
Oh,
What is
right,
the
the
Butter Battle
Butter
book?
Battle book.
What am I looking at here?
Yeah, that's a Dr. Seuss deep cut. I can't say I've read it.
The Butter Battle book is an incredible name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's more distinctive than Fire and Ice. I'll give it that.
What
Like
is-
even the title, it's just this is the most generic good versus evil the movie. You know, and like
Yeah.
it makes sense that this would be one of his first films, like getting his feet wet or that. And then as you build a name, you get more creative. Instead, the opposite happens. And I can't figure out why.
He did a movie in 19 or no, it's a short. Oh, it's 7 minutes. A 7-minute short in 67 by the name of Mini Squirts. A world in which
Oh,
children or grown-ups is explored through a couple who are having marital problems with amusing results. 4.3 out of 10 on IMDb.
yeah. Well, we've seen what Bakshi finds amusing, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Like,
I've got to see this.
the problem with also like 70s counterculture, politics, like we've also seen with Patti Smith and song titles, defenses of song titles, and that there's a sense of embracing shock and iconoclasm in a way that kind of makes sense in context, but when you look at it, even in context, you're kind of like, what the hell did you think you were doing? Um,
Who told
and
you
so,
this was okay?
yeah, and like,
What did you think we were gonna think?
that's what I love about American pop so much because, like, that's where Bakshi hits the crossroads between, like, sort of the crass juvenilia of Fritz the Cat versus the rotoscoping polish and utter genericism of this one. Like, this is a film that is made for a wider audience, but does not have any soul or heart to it. American Pop is made for a wider audience, and it is full of just like clumsy, sprawling, ambitious heart.
Joss Whedon versus Jim Jarmusch.
Yeah, in that they both have J names.
I think it's like, you know, generic popcorn heroism like an Avengers movie. Because I'm not afraid to piss those people off.
That's true. You are a counterculture iconoclast, my friend. I like the second Avengers movie when Bruce Banner's like, uh, it, or yeah, Bruce Banner. He's talking to Scarlet Widow or Black Widow. That's the one. Bruce Banner is talking to
Good
I
story.
Scarlett Johansson. That's the one. The point is, he is all
The
like,
Red Lady.
"Yeah, Red Lady, I
Hot
wanna."
one.
Hey, I'm Mark Ruffalo. I'm gonna turn into a monster. Get away from me. And she's all like, I'm Scarlett Johansson. I know what it's like to be a monster because I can't have children. And I'm like, I'm guessing a man wrote this.
It's like that is the same thing. You're right.
Yep. It's ooh, I know how the people in California feel. The other day I ripped the toe right off of my boot. And then it snowed, so I'm walking around in a broken boot, and I stepped in a puddle.
Well,
This fire has been great for Heidi and Spencer Pratt, though.
How so?
They're killing it on TikTok. The internet loves them now.
Oh.
They were the villains in The Hills.
yeah, you're gonna have to dial it back. We don't know what that means.
Come on, figure it out. This is pop culture. You know all the culture.
If anything,
never mind.
She's mugging
if anything,
us.
if anything, us doing a podcast in 2025 about Ralph Bakshi means we are not culture. We are counterculture through and through. As evidenced by my groovebox. So I'm going to play us out on some exit music, and our interesting and rewarding journey is coming to a close with our next episode. As we often say, leave them wanting more. Everybody walk the dinosaur. We're going to bring our series to an end looking at the famous / infamous Cool World with Brad Pitt and Gabriel Byrne.
And
one of them had a much bigger career than the other.
It's Who Framed Rodney Rabbit?
Yes. I wrote this song for the item shop in an NES game. In the meantime, you can find us places that don't. You guys have any parting words for our audience?
Not today.
That sounds so badass.
Not today, but maybe next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Bakshi!